Woo-hoo. All right, all right. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, pretend fans. All right, hello, everyone. Welcome into this Monday edition of Talking Sports at Work. I am your host, Eric Personally. Hope everyone had a tremendous weekend. I know I did. I know most of Vol Nation, most Vols fans had a good weekend. Um, Boy, that went about as well as it could have. I even texted my cousin late Saturday night and said, "Man, this might be the best Saturday ever." Um, and a lot of things went the Vols' way. A lot of things went crazy in college football. A lot to talk about there. The new rankings will be coming out tomorrow. The AP poll obviously came out today and looked the way I expected it to look, and that's good. Um, a lot to talk about in college football, a lot to talk about in the NFL. The Titans got their third win of the season, and we're going to do a new thing, a new little game with the Titans, which, I don't know if we'll do this all the time, but I thought, there's a lot of good news and a lot of bad news. So we're going to play a new game called Good News, Bad News with the Titans when we get to that segment. We will talk about all the current situation in the SEC and in the college football playoffs. We will talk about my regional teams. We talk about a running back that deserves some very, very, very serious consideration for MVP in the NFL, as well as the latest installment of the Harbaugh, where the Harbaughs will be facing off against one another on a Monday Night Football, one of the best Monday Night Football games this season. One that is actually has a lot on the line and a lot of storylines behind it and a lot to be excited about. So we've got a lot to dive into. I'm going to take a quick break, see if I can stop somewhere and look at my notes, and I'll be right back. All right, friends, welcome back. So, those of you who follow me on social media may have noticed, a few weeks ago I started doing some short videos on TikTok and on YouTube. And a couple of weeks ago, I caught a bunch of hell from Big Ten people for saying that Indiana and Penn State did not belong where they are. And I was very, very tempted this weekend to go back to those comments and ask those people how they felt about it now, but I did not want to be petty, and I just really didn't have the time for it anyway, and I just decided against it. But I this is the situation, and this is also going to be showing one of the problems with the current structure, which this is all new, so there were going to be problems, but the SEC teams just continue to beat up on one another. And when you've got, one conference that has 9, 10 teams that would beat 95% of the other college football teams, it's not really fair to weigh those records as being the same, even in the Big Ten, where there are really only two good teams. And yes, I stand by that. There are only two, well, there are three good teams. Well, no, we'll say there are actually four good teams, but there are only two teams in the Big Ten that even have a shot the national championship. There are only two teams in the Big Ten that would beat any of the top nine teams in the SEC, and that's just the way it is. And now I'm not going to harp on all that because I don't want to go negative with this, but man, things went well for us on Saturday. Now the ball started at 1 o'clock, which was kind of weird because most of the other games started at noon. So I've said this before. I love YouTube TV and the multi-view feature where you can watch multiple games, the sort of picture-in-picture thing. Which I guess you've kind of always been able to do that, but who actually used the picture in picture feature on their television? That was always too hard to use. Um, but anyway, so I'm keeping up with a lot of games, and everything in the early window went almost perfectly for Tennessee. The only thing that could have gone better is if Minnesota had gone ahead and beaten Penn State, which I actually bet on Minnesota to win that one because the money line was very tempting, and I know Penn State's had trouble there before, and I just again don't consider Penn State to be a legitimate team. Uh, but they did end up pulling that one out, as they should have, given where they're ranked. But that was really, really close. But anyway, the Gators took care of the Ole Miss Rebels for us, and I normally do not take pleasure in seeing anybody else unhappy. I enjoyed watching Lane Kiffin's press conference after that one. I just did. Part of me hates to admit it, but it's the truth. I enjoyed seeing him be that his complete and utter failure. Um, so that was nice. And it was also weird. I know most of you probably saw it, and I understood the sentiment, but seeing Vols fans doing that Gator chomp when they announced the score in the stadium, that felt wrong to me. I didn't like that. But again, I understood the sentiment, and I was doing it mentally myself all Saturday anyway. Um, and then also Ohio State did exactly what I expected them to do. They stomped on Indiana. Now that one was close for the first quarter. And Indiana scored first, and it looks like, man, okay, they maybe I'm wrong about them. Maybe they will actually give a top tier team some trouble. And then, after that first quarter, they pulled some Tennessee Titans and had some special teams gaps, and then from there, Ohio State just totally took over and demolished them. So that meant that, Tennessee and Georgia should now move up at least two spots ahead of Indiana, ahead of Ole Miss, and it all but guarantees us a spot in the playoffs. Um, so that was awesome to see. Now, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought because there's just so much to cover with this, really. But it also it went even further Saturday night and with Oklahoma just demolishing Alabama. I mean, that one has to be the most surprising result of the weekend because I won some money on those early games Saturday. I had Ohio State winning by uh, double digits, I think. I had Florida. I think the spread on it was like 11 and a half, and I had a couple of other ones. Or I had maybe Minnesota with the spread on that one because it was a really big spread. But I won some bets on that on the game Saturday. But more than any of that, and I even said, man, I'd give all of them. I'm fine with. I'm not even as worried about the money right now as much as the fact that the Vols are now pretty much guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. But this again just goes to show that the SEC teams are just going to continue to beat up on one another, and how it's hard to really compare these records as if they are equal. Uh, I mean, let's face it, a an 11-1 Big Ten team is not it's not as comparable, or it's not the same as being 11-1 in the SEC. 10-2 in the SEC is very different than 10-2 in any other conference. That's just the way it is. And I mean, we've seen example after example of these teams that we know are good teams. Ole Miss is a good team. Alabama, crazy inconsistent, but is a good team. Tennessee, losing like we did at Arkansas. Tennessee's a good team. Georgia has lost two games. We know they're a good team. So these teams that we know are good teams, losing multiple games, especially on the road in the SEC, that's just the way it is. It's hard to win every game. It's hard to win most games in this conference. And so I don't know. I think they're going to start maybe weighing these differently, or maybe, once we finally get to this whole super conference thing that they've been talking about for a while, it'll even out. I don't know. But I mean, does Indiana deserve to be in over Ole Miss? Yes, absolutely. Do they deserve to be in over Alabama? Yes, absolutely. Would they beat Ole Miss or Alabama on a neutral site? Probably not. But, and this again goes to the whole, conversation about is it the more deserving team? Is it the better team? That was such a big element of last year. Um, and that's the whole eye test thing that everybody wanted, right? But anyway, I feel like I'm kind of all over the place. Um, but Alabama, we had Ole Miss loses, we'll move ahead of them. Indiana gets creamed, we should move ahead of them. Um, and then Alabama loses. And so that means Tennessee should move up three spots in the rankings, I would imagine. Now, they may still try to keep Indiana ahead of us, and I will be unhappy about that if that's the case. But we know we're all but guaranteed a spot in the playoffs as long as we beat Vanderbilt. And that's obviously not a given like it usually is, but we should be able to take care of them, even though it's on the road. It's in the state of Tennessee, and even at Vanderbilt is pretty much a home game for us, um, at least when it comes to the crowd. So everything really went the Vols' way. And also, not to mention the fact that this team that they were ranked as of last week, what, three, four spots ahead of us, even though they had the same record and we'd beaten them head to head. Now, if we win against Vanderbilt, Tennessee will not only have beaten Alabama head to head, we will also have beaten both of the other teams that beat Alabama. So it's a definitive thing now. That if there was even going to be, uh, even close to a discussion, which, I don't think Alabama, after getting demolished the way they did, I don't even think they should be on the bubble. Even though they are still, yeah, one of the 12 best teams in the country, this is a performance thing. And that's why I say, the whole deserving element is a big factor here. It doesn't matter how talented your roster is. We all know Georgia, Alabama, uh, Ole Miss, Tennessee, all these teams are super duper talented. It doesn't matter though if you're not performing on the field. That's what this is all about. That's why it's such a problem with Florida State and Georgia being left out last year. But, and this is the thing too. And they said that, expanding the field to 12 was maybe going to uh, keep it to where there weren't as many teams that had a gripe to be in. Of course, that's not going to happen. Now more teams are going to have a legitimate case to make to be in. But anyway, again, I kind of feel like I'm all over the place with this. Um, what I do hope now, one thing is we're not going to get a home game. That's very, very unlikely. The only way that I think we could get a home game is if multiple other teams ahead of us lose their final game of the season. That would be Penn State. If Indiana, I don't even know who they're playing. Well, no, because they shouldn't be ranked ahead of us anyway. But Ohio State's probably going to stay ahead of us no matter what happens. So is Oregon. Texas probably will too because they only have one loss. So a home game, man, that was like sort of the dream was a home playoff game at Neyland Stadium. And God, I can't imagine how much that would have cost. But I definitely wouldn't have been able to afford to go, but I would have loved to see it. But that's unfortunately not going to happen this year. But either way, I hope with all my heart I hope that it works out that we get either Indiana or Penn State in the first round. Oh man, that would just make me so happy. Because, and if that happens, then I really might go back to some of those old comments from a couple of weeks ago. Um, but man, things just went about as well as they could have. The only way it would have been better is maybe if no Army beats Notre Dame and Minnesota beats Penn State. But for us to go ahead and have two of the teams ahead of us lose, actually three of the teams, I'm very very satisfied with that. Now, the one caveat to this, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at a minute ago, was that now our best win, or our highest quality win of the season, doesn't look quite as good, and that's Alabama. But again, I think you also can factor into that the fact that we've not only beaten Alabama, a team that everyone will agree is at worst a good team, but we've also, if we win this week, we'll have beaten both of the teams they lost to, both of the other teams they lost to. So again, everything's looking good for the Vols. We just need to take care of business. We will not be playing in the SEC championship, which I'm not at all disappointed about, honestly. I mean, there was a part of me that once I started seeing the chaos and also seeing Texas A&M lose at Auburn. That was a game that I did not bet on because I knew this one just seems, yeah, this one seems like it could possibly go crazy. But that was another big upset from the week. So, but now, even still, even with that loss, if they win, the game against Texas is now essentially is for a spot in the SEC championship, and Georgia is the team that clinched that spot. So I knew there were a lot of things that needed to happen. And once I started seeing the chaos going on, I thought, well, hey, maybe there's a chance we even get to play in the SEC championship. But, I'm not upset that we're not going to get that spot because let's face it, right now, I don't want another rematch with Georgia. Not yet. Because, I mean, I'm going to be honest. If they play their best, their best is still better than our best right now. It's just that sucks, but it's the truth. They are still more loaded with talent than anybody in the country, maybe with the exception of Ohio State, and Alabama being close, just because they've continued to have top two, three recruiting classes for the last what 6, 7, however many years now. So if they play the game like they played it against us last week, I don't know how we beat them. But I do think we could beat Texas. I do think we could beat Texas A&M. I do think we could beat pretty much anybody else right now. But the way that Georgia game went, man, if Carson Beck is playing that way, and look, I know if we want to actually win the national championship, then we're probably going to have to go through them. But that was never my expectation for this year. We are still, let's not forget, only in year 4 of Josh Heupel's tenure. And this was a program he took over that was in the toilet, that was as low as Tennessee football has ever been. We're still really ahead of schedule. So my expectations were never to win the national championship this year. If you had realistic hopes and goals and expectations for this year, it should have been exactly what's happened for us to win 10 games and for us to make the new expanded 12-team playoff and hopefully win a game in the playoffs. That's my realistic, positive, hopeful expectations for this team. And here we are. I still think we're a little ways away from really being, ready to compete for a national championship. But hey, things could go our way. I'm not saying it's out of the question, not by any stretch that we win it this year. But I'm just saying that was never my expectation. And if we win it, that would certainly be exceeding my wildest, realistic hopes for this year. Anyway, I also got to throw in just really quickly a little love for Vols basketball, which is looking outstanding. Chaz Lanier is totally stepping into those Dalton Connect shoes, and it seems like Rick Barnes is onto something with this whole small school transfer thing. I'm not going to dedicate a lot of time to them though just yet because football's still going to take precedence over everything while we've got football, and I'm gonna cling to these last few weeks of football as much as I can. So I'm gonna take a quick break and we'll dive into probably some NFL stuff. All right, hey friends. There was one other thought that I wanted to kind of two other thoughts that I wanted to kind of throw in there, and that is that and this is sort of tied to what I was talking about with the conference thing. But it's funny to think now that it felt like there was going to be absolute chaos and just incomprehensible tiebreakers where we're just going to trust the computers. In the SEC, it felt like that as recently as 2 days ago, but now, as it turns out, the SEC thing is very clear, and it's the Big 12 that has all these crazy tiebreaker scenarios. Um, and again, just looking at the rankings, and you wonder, how many of these teams are better than let's say like right now in the AP poll. SMU and Miami are atop the ACC, but Clemson's right there with a shot to get in the ACC championship as well. They're currently right now 12th in the AP poll. So if you look at those teams, the ACC now could get two teams in. The Big 12 is probably only going to get one team because they've just, it's been crazy. And now BYU has lost again. BYU's lost back-to-back games. Colorado loses to Kansas. So now they're probably going to get in only with their automatic conference championship bid. But now the ACC team or the ACC could get two or three teams in. The Big 10 is going to get four teams in. The group of five is obviously going to get one. Um, and the SEC, the undisputed, best conference, is right now only looking like three teams are going to get in. Now, there could be some more chaos and things work out. But, if you look at the AP poll, they've got Alabama as 13. They've got Ole Miss as 15, South Carolina at 16. I mean, right now, I think South Carolina would be the most deserving. And could a three-loss SEC team get in? Absolutely. Should one? Well, it depends on how this stuff works out. If Miami loses another one or SMU loses another one, certainly if Indiana loses another one, um, then yeah, I would say, and again, I would say that all of those teams from Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. It feels like those are the six teams right now at this point that still stand a chance, at least. Those first three are all but in. And as well as Texas A&M. We can't forget about A&M because they still have a shot, but they would have to win the SEC championship to make it. Um, but so I guess there are still seven teams. And of those seven teams, especially those first six, would they beat Indiana and Miami and SMU and Arizona State and even Penn State? Yes, I think so. But you have to do it on the field. And so that's again the problem with this system where you've got this one group of just elite teams that are going to beat up on each other through the season. And no one else really has a schedule like that. But you know what? I'm not complaining. I'm happy with the way it's working out as long as my Vols get in. I would love for things to go crazy again this week and for us to for us to get a home game somehow. I'm not counting on that. But you know what I don't want is I don't want Texas to win the SEC and us to end up with Georgia in the first round at Georgia again. And I've been through all that. But just about any other scenario, I'm fine with. I'd be thrilled for us to go to Indiana. I'd be thrilled for us to go to Penn State. Um, Notre Dame. I would be just fine with us going to Notre Dame, even though they do look like, they have started to look like a legitimate threat. Um, but I still think we're better than all of those teams. Anyway, let me take another quick break because I really do want to talk about some NFL stuff, and I'll be. Hey, friends, welcome back. So, we're going to go ahead and do our good news, bad news game that I just came up with for the Tennessee Titans because there was a lot of both for our game against the Houston Texans on Sunday. Um, and look, I mean, honestly, it's for me at least, it's impossible to root for your team to lose if you're watching the game, even if it's in our best interest. So of course I was rooting for the Titans to win. I also had a bet on that one for Will Levis to go over 200 passing yards, which he almost hit that number in the first half. Excuse me, but there were a lot of pros and cons to that game in general. I mean, the good news is we beat a division opponent, a division rival that it looked like was running away with this division and still kind of is, but we were able to knock them down a peg in their own building. That's always a good thing. The bad news is that it hurts our draft position, as will any win at this point. Um, and so now I looked at it. I think we're currently sitting at like sixth or something in the first round of the NFL draft. If it ended today, a lot's going to change between now and then. Um, so that's the bad news is we hurt our draft position. The good news is that it may not be as important for us to be picking in the top three as I thought it was. Because Will Levis has now strung together three of the best games of his career. Certainly the best three games he's had this year. But maybe with the exception of that very first four touchdown game against Atlanta, these three games, Will Levis has looked the absolute best he has looked year and his NFL career. And I am leaning more and more every week towards okay, he's good. We've got our quarterback. I know, again, small sample size. He's had more bad games this year than good games still, but he still has time to continue to convince us. I don't know what it is. I talked about it in an episode last week, but there seems to be something to benching these young quarterbacks once they've already been starting, allowing them to take a step back, sit for a couple of games. It seems to have helped him. Now, Anthony Richardson still just looks like not a very good NFL quarterback, but I never thought he was going to be. And I haven't really been paying attention to Bryce Young that much, but I know they gave Kansas City a hell of a run for their money last week. So I'm assuming he's still looking pretty good. And there's something to this. So the good news is it's looking more and more like we have our quarterback. And that's what I've been hoping for all along is that he will, and there's reason to believe it. It's not like he's just out of nowhere flipped the switch and started playing well. Like that, those few weeks that he had off, there's reason to believe that that really was something that could help him for a young quarterback's development to just be able to take a step back, take a quick, and just learn for a few weeks. There's reason to believe that that fixed him. And he's always had the talent. Now he's making good decisions. Now he did have one in the Texans game that looked like maybe the old Will Levis, but that's now after seeing the way he's played for 3 games in a row, you can excuse that by he's a young quarterback. When he was doing it over and over and over, that was inexcusable because it's an indication of who he is. This is the Will Levis turnover. But now that he's strung together several good games, you can say, you know what? All right. Young quarterbacks do stupid things and make mistakes every once in a while. If he's done that once in 3 games, we can live with it. So there's the good news. The bad news is that I continue to have more and more questions about this coaching staff. Every single game we allow multiple special teams issues to either lose the game for us or cost us points or just make us lose even worse every single game. And again, this is coaching. You can't cover kicks. You cannot cover a kickoff. You can't go a single game without allowing a huge kick return or a punt block or a huge punt return. You can't go one game where you do something that every other NFL team takes as a given, that every other major college team takes as a given. That's a problem. And when you pair that with multiple back penalties every single game, I actually looked and they brought it up on the broadcast. We are, and I don't know if it's different now, but at that point in the game, we were like third in the NFL most penalized teams. And a lot of them are just stupid pre-snap penalties or penalties at the worst times on third down, an illegal contact, a defensive holding, just stupid shit. That goes to coaching. We didn't see that stuff under Mike Vrabel. We didn't see a team that couldn't cover a kickoff. We didn't see a team that continuously, multiple times every single game, hurt itself with penalties. I mean, it was basically like, that was one of the worst games we've seen from the Texans this year as well. If that had not been the case, we don't win that game. But they kept shooting themselves in the foot as well. And luckily, our defense was able to take advantage of some bad decisions by their quarterback, which were uncharacteristic. Um, so I don't know, man. This whole thing, like I said, has been flipped on its head because I've said all along, I don't know how many times I've said it now. This season is all about deciding, do we have the quarterback? Do we have the coach? For the first half of this year, it looked like, no, we absolutely do not have the quarterback, but the coach might be okay. Now, for the last 3 games, that has completely flipped on its head to where, yeah, I think we do have our quarterback now, or at least I'm getting more and more convinced. I said going into when we reinserted him in the starting lineup, he has maybe a 5% chance. And then after that good game, that first good game, it was like, okay, maybe it's a 10 to 15% chance. Now, after 3 good games, I'm willing to go up to 50-50. Or maybe just because I'm so hopeful about it, maybe even higher. But the coaching stuff is worrying me. I mean, these are all indications of bad coaching. When your team is not disciplined, and that's kick coverage, that's penalties, that's especially pre-snap penalties, and very harmful defensive penalties on third down. These are indications of coaching. Now, am I saying Brian Callahan should be fired? Absolutely not. I do not think he should be, and I don't think there's even much of a chance that he would be. But this stuff is concerning. and needs to be addressed one way or another. So, just to recap, the good news for the Titans is we took down a division rival that's, going to be in the playoffs and going to win the division, and we were able to take them down a peg in their own building. The bad news is, yeah, it hurt us in the draft a little bit, but whatever. The good news is that it looks like we may not need a top one or two draft pick because we actually might have our quarterback. The bad news is there were more questions every week arising about how good is this coaching staff when your team is so undisciplined. So, again, there's lots of good and lots of bad to take away from that. Overall, I'm going to say it's a positive because the thing that matters the most is the quarterback in the NFL. And the more he shows, the more I'm going to be hopeful about this team and its future. Um, and again, we've only got 3 wins. It's still very likely that we're going to be picking in the top five, or, at the very worst, we're going to have a top 10 pick. Should still be able to get a quality player. At this rate, it's looking like it needs to be a right tackle. Um, but yeah, so lots of good, lots of bad. And I'm also maybe just a look at the bright side kind of person. So I like that we were able to knock down the Texans in their own building. I love the fact that Will Levis has looked like an NFL quarterback for 3 weeks in a row now. And I'm okay with the rest of it for now. But we've got to figure out a way to cover kicks and cut out these ridiculous penalties. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll dive into some more football stuff in just a moment. Excuse me. Welcome back, friend. Um, so had absolute chaos in college football, which was the best thing for us. Had a little bit of chaos in the NFL as well. Maybe not quite to that degree, but I hope I apologize first of all that I didn't do an episode on Friday. I had been doing my betting tips and previews episodes every week, and I don't know why I didn't this past Friday. I think I just kind of wasn't. I don't know. You guys know I'm inconsistent with this stuff, and yeah, I try to do what I can, but I hope you guys have been paying attention to the bets that I have been putting out there. I had another good weekend. It wasn't a great weekend. But I did have another good weekend with Florida, and what was I had some big wins, and actually I won a 5 leg parlay in college football. That was one of the first ones I'd ever won where I had that many. Um, and it was like what was it was Ohio State by 9.5, Florida 14.5, Minnesota 14.5, Kentucky 21.5, and then what was the other one? There was one other uh element to that bet, and I can't remember what it was now. But anyway, I won, a lot on that one, even though it was only a $10 bet. It ended up paying off like well over 100. Um, and so had a good Saturday. I also had a pretty good Sunday because I had the Vikings, their spread. I had it 2.5, and I paired that with the Lions at 6.5. So that one paid off pretty well. Also had the Eagles. I did a little parlay, same game parlay with that, where it was the Eagles by 2.5, I think, and over 40 something points, and that one paid off really well. I was very close to hitting another one on that game where I had Saquon over 125 combined rushing and receiving. The Eagles spread, and then Jalen Hurts over 200 passing yards, but he came up 21 yards short of that, so I didn't hit that one. But man, the Eagles are for real, and I didn't. I'm going to say I did not watch most of that game. I went to bed before halftime last night, but I woke up and I looked at the stats and saw Saquon Barkley had over 200 rushing yards in that game, and he's already doing the things he's done this year. I think Saquon Barkley deserves real consideration for MVP this year. And especially when you factor in that nobody's really running away with it. You know, it feels like normally by this point in the season, we've got a good idea. Like it'll be a two or a three-man quarterback race. This year, it doesn't feel like anyone's really separating themselves. Lamar probably would be, the main top candidate for it if you look at statistics and, win loss and all that, the normal criteria. But I think there's going to be some fatigue with him, not wanting to give him his third MVP if there are other options available. Josh Allen is maybe the most deserving, is really probably the most valuable quarterback right now to his team. And also, you factor in the fact that the Ravens have kind of been struggling a little bit lately. Um, but Josh Allen just doesn't have really the stats to compare. Um, Patrick Mahomes is not going to be really in the conversation for the same reason. He doesn't have the stats this year. Joe Burrow has great stats, but they're not going to give it to a quarterback on a losing team. Um, So really, I think this is a year where a running back really could have a legitimate chance. Now he's going to have to break some records, and this is something they were talking about it on the radio this morning as well. They were saying that they think he could break Chris Johnson's scrimmage yards records, which it was great to hear a little reference to CJ because people really you don't hear much about him anymore, even though he's is the record holder for most scrimmage yards in an NFL season. Saquon could break that this year, and it's going to have to be like a historic season for them to give it to a non-quarterback, but he definitely could do that. And so I would love to see a running back, or I would love to see a non quarterback finally win the award for the first time since Adrian Peterson, like 20 years ago. Um, and Saquon Barkley is just doing things that, God, what does it say about the Giants that they had him for 4 years? And oh my goodness, that organization. I don't know how their fans must be feeling, but to see him doing the things that he's doing and know that we had this guy for 4 years and just wasted the first 4 years of a running back's career. Oh, goodness. But anyway, we've got an interesting one coming up tonight. I'm actually going to take one more break and then we'll dive into that. Okie dokie, welcome back, friends. A good Monday night game coming up, which is we don't always get that. We've got Harbaugh versus Harbaugh. Good to see them both back in the NFL. And man, I have been fully on the Chargers bandwagon for a few weeks now. And especially after seeing what they did to my Titans, this team is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And the way that the Ravens are kind of struggling lately, I'm taking the Chargers money line in this one. In fact, there's a bet on Hard Rock where it's boosted to like 170 or something for the Chargers to win. And now I'm not saying I'm 100% on that by any stretch, but I love the Chargers defense. I love Justin Herbert. Now, so far, John and Jim have coached against each other twice, and John is 2-0. But this feels like a time when Jim could get his first win against his brother. Um, the teams are a lot more comparable than we would have thought going into this season. The Chargers definitely have the better defense. The quarterbacks are, you know, obviously Lamar is special, but so is Justin Herbert. Um, J.K. Dobbins has finally been able to stay healthy. I've drafted him so many times in fantasy in the middle or late rounds, thinking, okay, this year he's finally going to stay healthy. And this year I didn't do it. And of course, this is the year he stays healthy. Um, but he's been very good for them. Um, I just feel like this is a time when the Chargers could really assert themselves. They did it on a national stage last week on Sunday Night Football against a so-so Bengals team. Now it's a chance for them to prove that we are not only one of the better teams and going to be in the playoffs this year, but we deserve to be among the elite teams in the AFC. Now, the other side of that is I think this game probably means more to the Ravens because they, I feel like, need this win more. The Chargers, you got to feel like, are thrilled to be where they are. They're like, what, 6-3 or something? I don't know, but they have a really good record and, are poised to be in the playoffs and, maybe even. If Kansas City stumbles anymore, maybe even have a chance of competing for that division. But the Chargers have not been good for a long time. Now they definitively are. The Ravens have had very high expectations for the last few years now and have come up short. And so now, especially given the fact that they've stumbled a little bit in the last few weeks and that their defense has been, the defense of the Ravens has been their calling card for since their existence. And they now have the worst pass defense in the NFL, or at least one of the worst. And it just feels like the Ravens are sort of in trouble right now. So it feels like they probably need this game more. And that's the one reason that I'm a little bit hesitant about taking these Chargers as an underdog. But again, that's what I'm going to do. And it should be a good game either way. And I'm very excited to see it. And I've always been a fan of both Harbaughs as well. So I like seeing them. The one little personal, I guess, sort of caveat or maybe some bad memories that this brings up, and this is just sort of a personal to maybe a TMI thing, but the time I tried to get sober once before in my life, and this has been, well, like 12 years ago, maybe. And I stayed sober for a few months, and the time when I slipped up and relapsed was the Super Bowl, where it was Jim versus John and the Niners against the Ravens. And I was at a Super Bowl party, and I slipped, I decided, maybe I could have a drink. And so we're going to repeat that process. I mean, I'm not saying by any that I'm planning on repeating that this time, but I guess that is my one little negative association that I have with the Horrible. But again, excited for Monday Night Football. And I'm going to take one more quick break, and I'll be right back, and we'll go ahead and close things. Alrighty, friends, welcome back. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Continue to, I'm not going to tell you to stay tuned for the other podcast, although I am planning on doing it, but I've been planning on getting it started for a couple of months now. So when I get it up there, I'll let you guys know. But continue to stay tuned to the YouTube channel as well as my social media at HDW personally on most of those thingies. And if I don't talk to you again, I actually have 2 days off this week, which is crazy because I'm getting my off day surprisingly, which is Wednesday, and then I'm also going to be off on Thanksgiving. So I hope everyone has a tremendous. If I don't talk to you between now and then, I hope you have a great and a safe and a happy Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you again soon. All right, love you guys. Bye.